Hello and welcome to this week's portrait painting demonstration. Today we'll be drawing Mr. Potato Head. No, I'm just kidding. This is going to be the generic human head, or the basic human proportions. So right there is the axis of the center line of the head. You can see I've marked top and bottom. So halfway between the top and the bottom is going to be the axis of the eyes, roughly. And halfway between the axis of the eyes and the chin is going to be the nose, and halfway between the nose and the chin is going to be the mouth. So the tear ducts of the eyes match up usually with the outside of the mouth. So these dots represent the inner corners of the eye, and you can see these lines are matching up with the outside of the mouth for Mr. Potato Head. The width of the eyes are usually the distance of the length of the nose just until you reach the wing of the nose or the nostril. Please keep in mind that this is just a demonstration for the basic proportions of the head. This isn't going to be how I'm starting the actual painting, in case you were wondering that. And the ears fall roughly in between the axis of the eye and the axis of the nose. As you can see, these lines I'm drawing out. And here goes the ears of Mr. Potato Head. So now we're going to give Mr. Potato Head a hairline. That is, we're going to give him a distance of his forehead. So the face can be split up into thirds. So 1/3 of it would be the length of the forehead, the other third would be the length of the nose, and then the final third would be the length from the nose to the chin. So now we're going to get into the next portion of the video, which is going to be gesture. And gesture is the motion of the pose. It's not really trying to get a likeness per se, but it is trying to draw the movement that the head is making. So you can see that I just drew a head just staring at us in space, just straight on. The next is a head in profile view from the left. And then the next is going to be the head in profile view from the right. So what I use is the axis of the eyes, the center line of the head, the axis of the nose, and the ear. And I use just a basic oval shape for the head, and this is just telling me the general movement of the head. So now I'm going to draw a head that's leaning back. So we have the oval shape of the head, and now we have the axis of the eyes and the axis of the nose. And then in between the two is going to be the ear. You can tell when a head is tilted back, you're going to see the bottom of the chin, and the ears are going to sit pretty low on the head. And now we're going to draw a head tilted down, or looking down. So there's the axis of the eyes, the axis of the nose, and the ears. Mr. Dumbo's ears. I kind of messed up there. I'm going to fix that. So when the head is tilted down, the ears go pretty high up on the outside shape of the head. And there's the shoulders. Finally, we're getting to the painting portion of this video. So I'm going to use a little bit of burnt umber diluted with some paint thinner. Others refer to it as dark. So I don't want it to be too washy, and I'm gonna make a little mark here just to show you what I'm doing. So this time I'm going to focus on drawing with the paint. So this right here is a eraser brush. Well, I call it an eraser brush. So it's a regular brush that just has paint thinner on it, and I'm using it to push the paint around. So it's going to act as an eraser. And whenever I draw with paint like this, I'm going to be using a bristle brush. Bristle brushes are a little more rough than synthetic brushes. That's why they're easier to push paint around. Another thing I'd recommend if you're going to be drawing like this with paint is to work on white. Now, working on white is kind of a taboo, but I like it because I get to go really dark with my darks and work as if it were charcoal. So I'm starting off with the gesture of the head. Here's the generic Mr. Potato Head oval shape that I'm using. And this is the axis of the eyes and the axis of the nose. So at this point you can tell that the head, well, I hope you can tell that the head is in profile to the right and is tilted down. So I have the movement of the pose now. And right here you're going to see the axis of the shoulder line. The shoulder is also on an angle. Alright, so once I have the movement of the pose, I'm gonna then move into the block-in stage. So this is where I use straight lines and angles, very simple straight lines and angles, to indicate the general proportion of the pose and the outside shape. So whenever I try to get a likeness to a model, I'm really thinking about the distance of the eyes to the nose, and the nose to the mouth, and the mouth to the chin. So what I'm thinking is, how does it vary from the generic head? What does this model have that the generic head doesn't have? In this case, the model has a little bit more distance from the eyes to the nose, and the distance from the nose to the mouth, known as the philtrum, is a little bit smaller on this model than usual, and the distance from the mouth to the bottom of the chin is a little bit longer than usual. So once I have the basic block in, I'm then going to start to draw a little more, or introduce some dark lights and refine the outside shape a little bit more. I'm going to skip this portion on the video because this video is more about how to draw the gesture and the block in with paint. Maybe in the next video I'll show you how to get these edges to work and how to get these values. But for now, let's just skip ahead to the finished version of this drawing. And there you have it. There's the finished version of this drawing. I try to get it to where it's just like a brush mark or so to fix like anything that's off. So now I'm going to be mixing some burnt umber, cad yellow, permanent green light, alizarin crimson, cerulean blue, more cerulean blue, And this is going to be my shadow color. So whenever I start a portrait painting with a more refined umber drawing, I usually work my way up from the darks. So I work my way up in value. As you can tell, I'm starting with the shadow side of the face. And I'm mixing a little more cad yellow. It's too dark. This is also what you want to do if you're working on a white canvas or white panel, is to work your way up from the darks. Alright, it's time to mix up some flesh colors. Starting with my cad red light, yellow ochre, cadmium yellow, a little bit of titanium white, back to the cad yellow, back to the titanium white again. Let's cool it down with some permanent green light. A little bit more of the orange so we don't get a zombie effect. Back to my alizarin crimson, burnt umber, and my cerulean blue. Cad yellow again. Cad red light, cad yellow, titanium white. So I'm doing this to mix up a generic value scale of flesh tones so that I can compare my values against one another. I've gotten to the point where I kind of do this with every pose now, really. It just helps me get an idea of my colors and values in relation to one another before I put it on the canvas or the panel. So since I'm working my way up from the darks, I'm going to be starting with the dark light first, or the area of the light just as it turns into shadow. If you watched my other videos, you've heard that the areas that get further away from the light get darker, and the areas that turn closer to the light get lighter. And this is my thought process when I'm modeling out the form. See how these areas are starting to face the light more, so I'm attempting to make them lighter in comparison. Since I have my drawing worked out, turning form on this pose is going to be relatively easy. So I've sped up this portion of the video just so you can watch me build up the forms as I move higher up in the value scale. I'm making large indications for the big planes, like the side of the face and the top side of the face, the side plane of the nose, the top plane of the nose, and so on and so forth. So one important anatomical landmark or structure, whatever you want to call it, on profiles of the face is going to be the zygomatic arch, or also known as the cheekbone. So that is an area that gets a little bit darker as it goes further down, but then gets lighter again as the jaw starts to creep into light. It's kind of a push and pull, really. You don't want the entire side of the face to be completely dark and flat. Then the person is going to look really like Mr. Potato Head. So take time to study these structures. Look at master drawings. Look at whatever paintings you can that show you the roadmaps. So as we approach the ending of this portrait demonstration, I'm going to put a little more thought into my background color. I wouldn't recommend putting a background color at the end, but since this is a demo, I'm kind of doing whatever I want. So I'm putting some ultramarine blue, some burnt umber, a little more ultramarine blue, and lighten it up with some white to create a nice middle gray that's still a little bit blue. And I want these blues to contrast with the warmer colors in the skin tones. As you can see, I'm also using this background color to draw out the outside shape of the head. This can be pretty tricky and scary, but don't worry, if you cut into the head a little bit, it's not the end of the world. It creates a nice effect sometimes when you push into a color and then push right back out of it. But I'm not gonna do that. I'm just drawing out the outside of his face. I guess I just got lazy at this point. Before I end this video, here's another important drawing tip to use for profile views. So from the chin to the top of the head, not that I can see it because there's hair, but I'm kind of pretending I see it, is usually the distance of the width of the head. So that was that measurement I just made. So now I'm going to make that correction, and while I'm making that correction, I'm going to have some fun painting the dark values of the hair. Thanks again for watching this week's portrait painting demonstration, and stay tuned for more weekly videos.